fascinating because in our government environments that we actually have, we're actually looking at things in terms of Copilot. And I was talking to a Microsoft representative the other day. We're invited to, there's a conference on the East Coast called TWIX, which is the way the military is broken up. This is the East Coast Defense Coalition that handles all the Air Force. And one of the things that we have been asked to talk about is the government deployment of Copilot. Now, it's interesting because what's happening in terms of the armed forces and happening like our business as well, we are actively deploying Copilot. And when my discussion in terms of, we have a lot of different types of topics. You hear about, large language model, about privacy. We're going to go over through some of that today. But what's happening with Copilot with Microsoft is when you have a 365 tenant, what you hear about ChatGPT and everything else, what Microsoft literally did is clone that environment, that large language model environment, and dropped it in uniquely into your tenant. So everything like we do in like KAMIND, for instance, since we started deploying Copilot, the AI tools, it's all unique to us. The data is all our data, and it's not shared publicly. So it's really kind of interesting. But before we get through it, we actually talk about why this is so important. Let's just look at, this is an interesting chart that I find that's just fascinating because you look in terms of what's happened in terms of adoption. And this is when you look in terms of how it affects all our business. Look at phones. Mobile phones took like 16 years to get 100 million user adoption. And look what happened with Facebook's, it's 4.5 years. ChatGPT, the original, one of the original versions, 3 months. Think about that, 3 months. That's how much people are basically looking for things to actually figure out how to actually assist it. Now, AI is not here to say, hey, they're going to take over the world and everything like that. This is about how do we use the tools to augment our business. Like here in Oregon, for instance, we run the same situation is that we just got notices from the metropolitan area. There's a 1% business tax that is going through for businesses, and we're trying to figure out, okay, what is the impact? So we're looking at all these things of basically figuring out what tools can we actually use to make us more efficient, make us more productivity, increase our productivity, but also increase the ability in terms of how, in our case, how we service as customers, how we handle security environments, but also how we do our day-to-day activity. And if you start looking at what this really means in terms of going to organizations, and this is a poll that Microsoft did in terms with MIT Sloan Institutes, they're basically, everyone believes that 87% of the organizations polled, and there was a lot of them that was queried, basically believe that the AI will give them a competitive edge. The question is, what is that edge and what is the opportunity in terms of how we actually look at our business and how do we actually look at the things? Now, there's different strategies that you have with AI. You hear what Elon Musk is doing with Tesla. You hear in terms of what Google is doing. You hear some of the AI assistants with Elon, with some of the new brain technology in terms of trying to help handicaps and people that with disabilities to basically use their voice, be able to communicate better. There's a lot of different things that are happening in terms of the world. So in some ways, we're trying to figure out solutions, but we're trying to figure out how tools work and how tools help. As we went into like 365 and look for where we started it years ago with Office 365, we're looking at ways of how to make us more efficient, how to get our cost structure, how to get more secure. And we're becoming more and more efficient at using those tools. But AI, in terms of Microsoft, they took a different approach. And that's where they came up with the whole idea of Copilot. And Copilot, from a mindset, is an AI assistant. Now, what this really means is it's not trying to take over your job and everything else. It's trying to be more productive. Like many of you that's known as our clients, you notice that we sometimes receive emails from me, notice that I have typos, I misspell things, my grammar's not quite correct. My problem is I'm slightly dyslexic, so I can't tell. And what's really bad sometimes, and my staff kind of complains a little bit, sometimes I actually train my dictionary incorrectly. So a lot of things happen. So trying to put the pieces in and everything else that you have. It's really trying to figure out what we want to actually do. Now, here's a quick video. I don't know if you've seen this one before, but we'll give this one a quick shot so you can actually see in terms of what the Microsoft says. Now, you should hear this hopefully you should hear this through the settings. Real quick, let me just stop this real quick. Are you all hearing this or not hearing this?
We can hear it.
I hear it as well.
Now, I tried in terms of myself and Copilot. What you're seeing here is when you actually have a fully trained environment, you basically have the ability to do those things. And the demo we're actually going to do later on, we're going to do some live times. Live demos are very difficult, but this is going to be kind of fun because what I'm going to ask for you to do is supply me a couple topics, and we're going to generate some on-the-fly presentations for a PowerPoint and just see what it actually puts together. Now, the way AI works in terms of the Microsoft, you have to train it. And as we go through the process, and it takes weeks and months to basically fully train it. And you have to keep that in mind as you look at the pieces. Now, the way Microsoft Copilot works is that this is known in terms of the training. This is known in Microsoft, inside your tenant, there's a unique semantic index. And that's where information relationship is kept. And you have this other concept called Microsoft Graph. What Microsoft Graph is, when you look at your 365 tenant, all your licensing, all your Azure, all your identity information is basically interconnected. And that's unique to your environment. So when we actually build and query using Copilot to do information, we're actually going through the process of looking through all this. Now, it's very important that you basically understand what the interconnection is at this stage, and there's training to get involved with, and you try to understand what the pieces are. And that's why Microsoft has the graph. They talk about the graph API, the connectors, and data connector. So one of the things, for instance, that we did at KAMIND, we took our documentation site that we use for all our SOPs that we have integrated, as well as our customer SOWs, we actually integrate those into Copilot. So now we can actually do very specific queries in terms of information. So we're actually using this whole thing of combination of the graph and also the index for Copilot, which is the semantic index. And that's what it referred to. Now, when I was talking to my Microsoft contacts, what they actually really exposed to me is what the semantic index is, and for Copilot is actually a version of the large language model that was cloned and stuck into each of your tenant. So when you actually look at that whole process, there's this intelligent entity that actually sits on top of your data that's coordinating and basically responding to questions and everything else that you actually have. So, and that's really key when you look at it, because when we start using things like Copilot or things like any AI chat, GPT, go pick it, you have to train it. The difference is, to the Microsoft model, you're training what's in your tenant and you're building based on your knowledge base and your skills and what you have. And what the semantic index is, when you actually look at it, it basically creates this whole environment.
identifying relationships, and making important connections. In fact, your brain works like a semantic index by encoding multiple words and pictures to create a larger conceptual map of information. For example, a semantic map of what the average person knows about elephants would include things like elephants have trunks, and elephants travel in herds, and elephants live in Africa. Today, people are mostly familiar with keyword search, which relies on exact words and phrases. So, when you search for March sales report, you get a list of documents that include exactly those 3 words. But a semantic index understands that sales reports are produced by Kelly on the finance team and published each month as an Excel file. And it encodes all of these concepts and relationships between concepts in vectors in the index. Semantic Index for Copilot analyzes your data. That's all your emails, documents, calendar, chats, and more in the Microsoft Graph, and uses a large language model, or LLM, to map all your content and the relationships between your content and you, searching through billions of vectors to find the most relevant results in milliseconds. It's what enables Microsoft 365 Copilot to deliver personalized, relevant, and actionable responses, and do so in a secure, compliant, privacy-preserving way. Semantic Index for Copilot enables every organization to be AI ready.
So when you actually start using the semantic index using queries, and that's what the real secret is how you start asking the questions and how you actually build the information associated with it. And that's how you actually put it to it. Now, the information that you're actually retrieved back from a query is going to be based on the comprehensive security controls that you have in the tenant. How is everything set up? Make sure data can only be accessed by the people that have data that are supposed to have access to it. And that's really important. So like in our case, we went through and deployed Copilot throughout the entire organization. And we're in the process of discovering, well, yes, we have to go do some data documentation, cleanup, and name restructuring to make sure things are easier found with some of the titles that make sense. We have to do some other things in terms of trying to figure out what the privileges are to make sure we have the right privileges that are in place. So those are just going to be normal type activities that you need to do. But the real issue is that there's going to be a point in time that's going to, in the near future, where you actually provision a license. And Microsoft has something called Purview. Purview is a security management control structure. Some folks have Purview implemented with security controls, some folks don't. And so at a point in time when you actually have AI and how it gets into your entire environment, it's going to start looking at these controls. So you have to really internalize how things are going to be put together. And really, you have to look at it from how can I or a small group of folks in your companies can actually use Copilot and start learning the capabilities of it. And keep in mind, when you look at what's happening, this is the revolution that you're seeing. You're seeing it across the board. You're seeing it in businesses as people readjusting what, in terms of type of jobs folks have, what's important, what's not important. And it's really about one thing. It's about, when you talk about businesses in general, it's about the impact it's going to have on the business, how you make things easier to use, but it's also going to be about, the productivity and the business value that you actually have. That's a personal productivity that you see. I know from my standpoint, just for what I do, it saves me roughly 1 to 2 hours a week. And, that's just doing easy things like rewriting docs and rewriting emails that I have to go through the process. But also when you start looking at finding information and looking through stuff, we're finding that we're seeing those values coming back to us. We had a situation where we're looking for some documents that we just could not find. And suddenly with Copilot, by actually having explicitly looking for certain types of document with certain contents in terms of result, we found those things. That's what you're actually seeing. You're starting to be very exact and explicit in terms of how you're doing things. And when you look at business in general, like we do a lot of business process with different types of technology, like EOS, for instance, which is an entrepreneur operating system, is business operating system, or Rockefeller Habits. and you look in terms of how you scale a business and how you be more efficient, it's about putting the necessary process and structure in place. And we're finding that Copilot is really helping us to actually achieve those. And that's the things that you actually see. You start seeing these business metrics that you're going to internalize, how you can actually see it in terms of what the personal productivity has, the value in terms of how you're doing your day-to-day activity, and looking in terms of, just like myself, looking at Outlook or looking at Word and how I do things. And also you're going to find in terms of the function roles that people have in doing correlation of data. Like, for instance, we actually have part of our license management system is in Dynamics. Part of our part of our contacts is into another CRM for Infusionsoft. Now we can interrelate those information and find out, okay, what's the changes? How does it relate? And look at correspondence from clients on emails and basically put that correspondence together in a very simple summary action. Those are the type of things that you're doing that we're learning how to do, and we're getting on the bandwagon to make sure that we can be more efficient to deliver better product to our clients. And that's what we're trying to do, and all of us can take advantage of it. But if this is like one case that Microsoft has in terms of typical savings that you run in terms of hours, and this is actually really true. I find that myself, I have saved just one week alone, I probably saved an easy 2 to 4 hours a week. Now you look at a month, I actually, because my productivity work activity, I actually basically ended up with an extra man day. And granted, I can do other things in it. What do they say is like, whatever time you have, you're going to fill it with whatever type of task you need to do. But what's happening is I'm being more efficient. I'm being more exact in terms of my communication. And, it's basically helping to make sure there's clarity. So this whole mindset of saving 10 hours per month, this is the results that Microsoft had in their early access program. This is basically what we're seeing. And as you look at, the question is, how do you actually do that? And how do you actually leverage it? And you're seeing other aspects that you actually see, in terms of, effective meetings, like in Teams meetings, for instance, for this meeting, which is being recorded. Now we can actually go through and say, okay, have Copilot give us a summary in terms of the meeting notes and everything associated with it. We can actually summarize the transcriptions. We can actually say, hey, John, John was in this, skipped this meeting. He sent me an email. He had some other questions. Give me a summary of what John's request was through his email and compare it to the summary of what we actually talked about. Will this benefit him? It's how you exact and start developing the phrases that you want to have. So let me just do a kind of a quick Copilot demo real quick. And what I'm going to do, but this is the type of things you do. So let me throw, this is one that I did yesterday. So we're going to actually do this. I actually generated, hopefully you can all see this. I'll make it a little bigger. On the right-hand side, you're seeing this is a Copilot chat. We have it integrated with Copilot. We have a license. I said, okay, there was a blank presentation. I said, create a presentation on model train control systems for HOH. Notice how I misspelled train control system. So what it did is actually generated this presentation for me on the fly. So when you actually look at things, you can actually feed information into it. Now we're just basically, we can create presentation from a slide. We can add a slide about information. But what I wanted to actually do is actually, let's go create one as a generic one and let you guys tell what would you like to have, what type of, and this is taking a lot of risk. But if someone has an idea, they can put it into a chat session and we can actually come up and create a presentation on the slide, on the slide. So what would you like me to do? Anybody have any ideas? Okay, we'll do one about using Microsoft 365 licenses. So it pulls the information together, and then we can actually tweak it and tweak it. So we have different things that we can actually put together. But this is typically the ideas that you have. You notice the slides are being generated now. So basically, it's like a canned presentation. Now I can actually feed something into it in terms of what it's having. It's pulling information from the website. And then we can actually say, okay, let's do something else. Is that, can you add information about the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint? So it's in terms of what you want to do is that you're using Copilot as an assistant to help you generate things. And okay, well, looks like that one didn't work. So let's go do the let's say add. And to go through the process, we're still trying to train our engine, and we're trying to get the other pieces on it. So, okay, so we added a slide for there. And then when you say that add, we'll see what this shows up. I hope it doesn't embarrass me. Okay. So it's the, okay, using the provided code. So, okay. Not quite sure, but gives you the idea of what you have and what you can do as you go build these things. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to train it in terms of your environment. We don't have like the Excel environment completely built up to do financial analysis, but you look at other pieces that you have, like one of the other things that you actually have when we actually bring in like Bing Enterprise Chat, for instance, when you actually go, which Microsoft has renamed Copilot. So you now have, in terms of, you can actually go query information that's unique to your tenant. So I can actually have, list all of the KAMIND migration documents or hybrid exchange.
Matt, while you're doing that, I just want to tell you that there are two ideas of adding to this in the chat.
Okay, let me go look at this real quick. Okay, what is the demographic breakdown, the fear of clowns? So what we have is we have documents here, and we can actually go create a new check. So I'm data mining different documents in my organization, as we can actually do another quote on here. We'll do a web quote.
And Ken Chrisman also had a request.
And let's do oops, here, that one. Let's bring up another PowerPoint slide real quick. Yeah, I guess coulrophobia. That was a good one for me. That was new. Let's go do this one, and I'll do a Copilot, and we'll do a designer on this one. Is let's say okay. So if you're building ideas and trying to get different types of ideas to just get started, you know how sometimes it's hard to start a presentation. You start with this and you go customize it and add the necessary things that you need to do, need to actually have. And you can actually do these things on the fly. Now, when you actually start taking and modifying presentations, like when I took this one, for instance, I can run it through Copilot and say, hey, please reorganize this under this agenda. There's different things you can do because what you're looking at this stage in terms of AI, you're trying to train your engines, but you're also trying to basically learn the tools and learn the semantics and learn the ability to do it and save you time. That's really the key. So as you look for different things, it's like then you can actually refer to, let's go add a slide about we'll add a slide about work-life balance and see what it says. So as you go putting something together on a material, you can do different types of things. And you can actually relate information together as well. So it's going to be throw something in terms of maintain the work-life balance. So you can actually go through and you put pieces in, you can build build the environment. And, so there's different stuff that you can actually do. So what do you think about that? You think that's pretty cool? But just it's all up to imagination how you can actually use stuff. That's really the secret. So let's get back in terms of what we're doing and just kind of give some summary, some pieces, and then we can have some questions on. The question that people ask is, how do you get started? Well, originally Microsoft had it was limited to, you had to be 300 users who use Copilot. Now they open it up, you can buy onesie, twosie licenses. But basically, the way Copilot works, it's embedded across all the applications. So as you've seen, like when I brought up PowerPoint, it had a little Copilot icon in it. And the key other aspect you have, it's in Teams in terms of how Teams works. So I find that, for instance, I'm going into a meeting, I basically, with a client, I say, hey, I have a meeting coming up with Ken. Please summarize all the emails and tickets that came in the past 14 days from Ken. So I'm prepared for the meeting, and it will give me the bullet by bullet summary. Those are the type of things you're looking at, is how do you actually use the assistant to actually make it work. That's why Microsoft called it Copilot. Now, what's the big difference between like OpenAI and Microsoft Copilot? They basically part of this all in terms of fairness, reliability, but the real key thing is the data is your data. Now, you heard the big thing about Amazon, the folks that have Alexa, for instance. Everyone that has Alexa, Amazon is actually using all the data they collected on Alexa to train their large language model. That's not happening in the Microsoft. You're training your own stuff internally. Now, the other aspect is that, your data is also protected by basically the security model. So you put the security model in place so only people have access to the data. Now, the one thing that is really that I saw that came out recently is this whole view of the copyright commitment. Copyright's a big thing. So you heard the terms of the litigation that's going on with the, the Times and some other folks in terms of suing Microsoft and other entities. But Microsoft basically said that they will guarantee, or they're basically going to make sure that there's no liability associated with if you're using Copilot to generate stuff, and it's found that the material is copyright infringement or something from a third party. They're going to stand behind it. So that's really interesting in terms of how it is, because it really shows that, copyright's a big thing. And you want to make sure if you're using these tools to help generate any type of marketing activity or documentation that you distributed publicly, you want to make sure that it's basically really you're protected and the business is protected. Now, in terms of how we actually we talked about the whole aspect. It's about foundational productivity. That's basically what the Microsoft AI engine's designed for. It's designed for in terms of how to actually put that together, and it's really trying to get the organization to be more productive and more efficient. And there's a couple of different stages that you actually have in terms of how you start getting ready to try to use Copilot. It's trying to basically make sure you have an understanding of the various protections necessary. And this is the difference between like the Microsoft Copilot and you have like ChatGPT. It's about how do you standardize user experience, make sure the permissions are set up, and how data is organized and sensitivity. And this is like close to our heart because in the case of handling like the NIST 800-171 requirements for the DoD, one of the issues associated we have with document sensitivity. So we have to basically be able to tag and understand documents. So KAMIND as an organization has implemented a model that we basically in our security products that we actually have built-in document sensitivity into our Guard and Fortress G product. And that's really important when you start looking at an organization, how do you actually restrict and control access. And it's really the whole pieces like you've seen before, putting the security in place, make sure you have the essential controls and make sure you have a comprehensive environment to really make sure you have policies and how data is basically restricted and access. And that's all part fundamental of the standards that we're doing for our NIST 800-171 for our defense clients, but also the standards that are coming through for our commercial clients. So any type of documents or insurance, third-party cyber insurance applications, you got to do the same thing. So I have a couple other slides on the pricing. That's a big issue that people have. In the retail side, there's really two products. There's the Copilot, which is free. That's the web version I showed you. And then if you're a personal user, you can get Copilot Pro. It's a $20 license. Now in the business, which is what we're talking about today, is of course you have the web version of Copilot, which we're running on the Windows 10, Windows 11 systems that we have. But you also have what we deployed the whole Copilot for Microsoft 365. Now, we're going to do an upcoming webinar on Copilot Studio and how to actually work it and integrate into your organization, how you actually use Copilot Studio, and how you do other things in terms like how to integrate enterprise search in your organization. The release versions that we have today of Copilot, you have of course, the free one, Copilot 365, which we actually have deployed. And we're in the process of deploying Copilot for Sales and Copilot for Service that actually integrates, and so we can actually integrate into our different parts of our ticketing system and enterprise to sales. The sales is an interesting one because we're really trying to figure out correlation between what customers want and what services that we have. So we're looking at ways that we can be more efficient and more timely in a response to clients. And that's really the secret. So how do you get started? It really is very simple to do. And basically, you can get started today. Start with a small group, 1 to 3 users. It's a $30 license. It's paid 1 year up front the way it's on an annual commitment, prepaid. And basically, you got to start learning the pieces on it and understand how it's going to run in your organization. So if you're interested in terms of Copilot, you want to look at this, just submit a feedback to kamin.com feedback, and we can actually provision some licenses for you. But it's basically, what you would want to do is get a small group of people, like-minded people in the same area, same department, same organization group. Learn how to play with it and learn what it can actually do for you. That's the secret before. So you have to understand and baseline your capabilities and start training that AI engine in your tenant. And with that, I'm going to open up for questions and see what, and we have roughly about 20 minutes left. If anyone has any questions, I can Adam, we had one question. Someone says that $30 per user. No, it's $30 per month times 12 months, or $360 is what the entry price is.
That's the whole organization wide?
No, it's per person.
$30 a month per person. Gotcha.
Yeah. So that's why, you look at it, you have to go, what I suggest is, you do 1 to 3 license, though you can actually, small team can play with it. And you have to make a business justification. How do you want to actually use it? And is the ROI in there for the organization? Because, $30 a month is still a spendy. So you want to make sure that it's useful. I mean, from my standpoint, my use on it, what I'm getting out of it, yeah, it's saved me about 8 hours a month. And is there any other questions that folks have? Okay. If not, then I thank you for your time. The next webinar we're going to do in March is going to be on the Copilot Studio. We're going to go under the hood, so to speak. It's not going to be super technical, but it's going to be how to use it from a business perspective. We'll have a later on discussion about how you actually do plugins and everything else. This is more about how do you actually use Copilot using the no-code, low-code tools, which are all visual drag and drop, and how do you actually use it and kind of put it into your environment. In fact, what I'd like to request is that if you have questions and think about it, over the next couple of days, or you have some questions that you would like us to cover in the upcoming webinar, just submit them email me. You can email Barbara or submit them at kamind.com/feedback. And we'll see how we can actually roll them into our upcoming presentation and try to get those questions answered. So with that,
there is another question. Is there a discounted price for not-for-profit?
Right now there is not, and basically there may be in 6 months. Right now, originally Copilot wasn't supposed to be released until May, and then Microsoft pulled it in 3 months. So there is going to be like not-for-profit education, but those are going to be probably announced in the July timeframe. And right now it's early access to try to learn it. And it does take a good, for indexing and everything else, it does take a good 7 weeks to 2 months to really get the data in the system.
Another question, Matt. Is Copilot included with any M365 licenses?
No, the short answer is no. Copilot right now is a add-on to all of the MS365 suites, like Business Premium, MS365 E3, MS365 E5, all the Microsoft suites. And once you put the license in place, then the Copilot icon lights up on the application. In the case of Outlook, for instance, I now have a Copilot option where I can actually say draft with Copilot, which will take my scrawl in an email and basically redraft it and to what I want. Now, when I actually make changes or make recommendations on it, it learns from that. So my drafting now constantly improves. Word has you write a paragraph and you can right click on a paragraph and say rewrite with Copilot. Those are the features that get enabled when you add a Copilot license, and it saves you time.
Is there any kind of, I don't know, run book or script, training script for this training process? Like, what does that involve? Just you using it over the course of time, or are there like specific tasks that you ask it to do and point it at specific repository, SharePoint, or whatever to train AI as you're describing it?
There's two answers on it for this. One is you have to, in order to train it, you have to give it data. So what we've done internally is we open it up to our SharePoint libraries and restrict it from some so it can start indexing, looking at the data. That's one thing we did. The second thing is that Copilot's based on prompts, so you have to learn to be exact in terms of what you want to see. Like in the case of, for yourself, John, is saying, I would use Copilot in MS365, for instance, say, give me a summary of John's email and list the five, and bulletize it into the 5 immediate action items I need to take. And what happens, you do, firstly, you get this more laundry list, and then over time, you're going to start getting more brief bullets in terms of what the style that you want. That's a training that happens. And what Microsoft has is they have two products that give you access to. One is Copilot Studio, when you get a license that you can actually use it to integrate to your third-party data sources, internally and externally. And the second one is the Copilot Labs, which you actually use to build your prompts and figure out what's a good prompt and what's a bad prompt. And prompts are how the AI works. The prompt is a question, specify data, what is the expected results? And the interesting thing is that this is no different than when you actually have employees that you're instructing or folks that you're instruction. Specify what you want. Basically tell them what to go look for data, how you want the things in return to you. So you don't get into the model where you ask somebody for a rock and you say, hey, not that rock. And the other question is, well, you can get from our homepage. We have a YouTube link at the bottom of the page. Just select the YouTube link and you get access to all our webinars. Do you have any other questions? Who thinks this is cool? Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how this progresses over the next months. I mean, we're finding it really is amazing what you're finding and how you're actually utilizing it and don't realize how much you're utilizing it. In our security products, for instance, in our Garden Fortress, Fortress G, we're using all the technology for AI and everything else to improve the correlation of events and everything else against the data sets that were captured. Well, if there's no other questions from anyone, then looks like we got 10 minutes left. I'll let everyone give your time back to you. I would request that if you have feedback, please fill out the www.kamind.com/feedback. Questions that you think we should cover in Copilot. What would you like to see in our upcoming webinars? And it's really trying to make sure, I mean, our purpose on the webinars is really to help educate you on what's available and help you improve your businesses and what's going on. With that, I thank you very much and wish you all a good afternoon and a happy Thursday.